video. I thought it might be helpful for those of my students, but also those of you who were just reading along with us, and also teachers and professors who are assigning writing. I thought it might be helpful to walk through a process I use called the inquiry paper, and to include an example of a recent inquiry paper that I thought was really well done. So, this offers some thoughts about how to write about Paradise Lost sort of several times along the way, not just a big paper at the end. And the rationale is this, that if students only write major papers, they're probably not going to get that good at writing. That they just don't simply write enough of them. So doing three or four couple of page essays along the way of reading something like a Paradise Lost. I'm doing the Odyssey now with my freshmen. We do six every four chapters. We do a 2 page essay. Um, it allows them to practice everything from a heading to citing quotations, and then I think most interestingly to develop thoughtful, not plot based inferences after quotations. Basically, just the act of looking closely at text. What does that involve? Um, I think a big reason to do this is kids come to class on the day these papers are due, and they have a question they've thought about and written a couple of pages about. So even the quiet kids who normally don't participate are in a circle and they have something that they're ready to talk about. And I find that I find as a result that these conversations are not only more dynamic, but nearly everyone participates. I think it's also important. I just remember in college, it seemed like the goal was to just read really fast. And there weren't a lot of chances to, as an English major, to stop and kind of soak in a text for a length of time. So what I tend to do is every four chapters with Paradise Lost. So we do this 3 times. We take, a couple of class periods and a couple of nights. We can kind of sit inside a few passages and do some writing. And and by the end, what that means is there's three sort of major sections of the book that my students have really spent significant time with, and that's before they write a major essay. Um, I also know that the foundation for really good literary writing isn't parenthetical citations and headings, and it's not all that. That's optics, and anybody can do that, and it's fine. But it's rich is simply the act of paying attention to text and looking at a text closely. I always tell students if you ever show art at an art gallery, the greatest favor anybody can do is just to stand and pay attention, look closely, ask questions, right? And what this affords us is the opportunity to practice that act that determines great writing, to practice that sort of throughout the reading of a text. And I would say for teachers to sort of conceptualize why this is particularly effective, I think it's a marriage of reader response theory. If you have a great book, Paradise Lost is a great book, but it's not the only one. If you have a great book, if you're reading the Odyssey or Paradise Lost or Beloved or like go down the line, you can flip to any page and hang out there and look at it closely, and it'll reward that. I think it's one of the criterion for a great book, frankly. So the reader response thing is great. They don't have to notice what I notice if it's a great book. So they notice things that stand out to them and are allowed to ask questions and to write about it. But then once they have quotations that stand out to them, I think I encourage a more formalist literary theory. In other words, look at the text. Look really closely at the words and the choices made there. It's a work of art. What did the artist do to make you notice that? And I think that's how to ask the question. Um, Tell the students, trust yourself, regardless of the text you're reading. If you notice something specifically, there's two people at work. Like you noticed it, and maybe it's because it reminds you of your Aunt Tilly, or maybe it has a favorite word in it. I don't know. Maybe it reminds you of a great fear, but also the artist constructed that moment so you notice it. So doing this, I think, honors the reader and it honors the writer. All right, so I suggest with something like a Shakespeare play, I don't know, maybe doing an inquiry paper every act or two. So you do two, three, five inquiry papers along the way. The Odyssey, as I said, we do six of them. Paradise Lost this year, I'm going to try doing every four chapters, so we'll do three. Um, So that's step number one. Get some reading under your belt. Two, um, for homework, I share an empty Google Doc with my students, and we practice this. And I think this is another presumed skill. Um, I think as kids get older, we need to tell them what to write less and less. Um, I could very easily say, write about the complexity of Satan's character, and they'd all go home and dutifully do that. But I know in the world, when they write, it's going to be writing things that they want to write that are interesting to them. And frankly, it doesn't matter to me what they write about as long as it's centered in the text. Sorry about the proofreading errors here. Good thing I'm not an English teacher. Kidding. So we just sort of collect questions. And early on, there's some kids who don't know how to do this, or they'll ask questions. I wonder what's going to happen at the end. Well, we can't write about that. Or I had students asking, how do conceptions of Milton Satan differ with conceptions of Satan today? Well, the question about conceptions of Satan today requires a lot more research than we can do. Like, stick to the book, you know. So I think that's the big thing. And as I say here, what we should be asking questions about is questions of motivation. Why do we think characters are doing what they're doing and saying what they're saying? How the thing is built. I had a student do a really interesting reflection on why the poem begins with the first 26 lines written the way they are. Um, where are their tensions? Like, God wants his creatures to know they have free will, but God has foreknowledge of their actions. And I know that there's a lot of philosophers that sort of do some philosophical gymnastics to get out of that, but I don't know if the poem does a good job with it. Um, so I think it's really important to constantly practice how to shape questions about what we read. And then I think this is also really important and it creates a dynamic environment. I have 45 seniors reading this. So I had 45 ish questions. And what a lot of kids do is they pick another question. They don't pick their own. They find another question that they like better. That's great. It doesn't matter. So here are some of the questions from this year, actually, from recently, books 1 to 4, Paradise Lost. Can Satan be called evil if he has the ability to recognize his acts as evil? This student remembered what I told them about Orson Welles saying Hamlet is very sane, because Orson Welles says insane people don't say the line, "What an ass am I," which Hamlet says in the "What a rogue and peasant slave am I" soliloquy. Um, and he just remembered that in the Satan soliloquy in book 4. If Satan can name himself as evil, how evil is he? I don't know, it's interesting. Two, it's about Satan's self awareness, which is a really cool topic. Two, why does Satan care about what the demons who look up to him think? And he's all worried about not letting them down. What does it say about Satan? Three, that famous quote, the mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. How does that change? How does that idea evolve? That's another great thing to do in a paper is how does this idea or character or concept move from this moment to this moment? How are sin and death perverted parallels of Adam and Eve? We're going to go back to that. How does the difference of scenery between the portrayal of Eden and hell change the way Satan thinks? This is just a little sampling, but just so you have a sense of what my students are writing about. I then give them 5 minutes and I just say, tell me what you think off the top of your head. Don't worry about proofreading. This isn't graded. Just vomit on the page. You know, I don't know. Do you think Satan's evil? Make a case either direction. Some kids make a bullet pointed list. Some kids write sentences, but it's good for them to just get their preconceived notions before they actually look really closely. Um, and this guy's talking about the relationship between the female character Sin and Eve. And these are his quotations. If you want to pause the video and read through them, that's fine. But they're ones you'd expect. I want you to notice. I encourage my students, like this young man did, to provide context for quotes. So we'll look at the first one together. She further goes into detail about her subsequent rape by death, her own child, and the ensuing torments she endures as she describes. So we have the speaker, Sin, we have the context of the quote, and we have a verb, and we have the quote accurately formatted, which, again, if you show students how to do this, they either choose to care about it or not. I don't lose sleep, by the way, I just take off points. Um, I just, I really encourage you, if you're teaching, teach this well, give them examples, but don't spend more energy than you should on formatting. Spend most of your energy on thinking and reading with the kids. I just hear a lot of chatter. We all, get aggravated, right? When something so simple as like put the period here and not here. Okay, fine. So anyway, this is just a list of quotes, but once you have this list, once you have it in a Google Doc, you can move it around. You don't have to type it again. And then I think we do a whole day on this, sometimes 2 days early on. We workshop inferences. And frankly, this is what makes the difference between a kid who gets an 88 and a 98. It's this. You can get an 88 and not have a lot of mistakes and have things functionally be there. Here's this quote. She goes into detail about her subsequent rape by death, her child, the ensuing torment she endures. And the quote is, Sin says, me overtook death's mother, all dismayed, and in embraces forcible and foul, engendering with me of that rape, begot these yelling monsters. And then I boldface the words that this student wrote about. My suggestion would be this process here. Boldface or underline the language that stands out, words. Trust that you're reading work of literature, and if you notice the passage, that the writer did something with language to make you notice it. Trust yourself and trust the writer. So physically mark the words. And then ask questions. Why is it important that the word me weirdly starts? That the direct object weirdly starts this? Why is it important that rape is here? So you can always ask, like, what is this word doing here as your question? And then answer your question. And folks, this is where inferences come from. They're an answer to your own question. But with literature, the question's about language. This isn't a political tract. This isn't a sociological or psychological tract. This is a literary text. So let's see what this student does. Sin places a very heavy emphasis on, ironically, the sins committed against herself, sin. By unconventionally beginning the sentence with the direct object me, and then immediately bringing up her role as a mother, she places her own victimized self at the center of these atrocities and elicits unexpected sympathy as such an antagonized character. That is great, isn't it? Sin further expands upon her nuanced role as a mother by describing death's attack as an embrace, a word which typically carries a safe, loving connotation, now used to describe a violent assault. Here's a tip. Words have like flavors to them. And here, words have denotative meaning, what a word literally means, but the connotative meaning, really great literary artists are using that. And this is what this student noticed. In this way, Sin's emphasizing the betrayal she experienced from her own kin. In contrast to Eve, she, Sin, was forced into sex by her father and son and is constantly tormented by her offspring. From the controlling descriptions forcible and foul, the passive engendering me, to the jarring single syllable of rape. So notice all that, like, this student really looked not only at which words were used, but how they were organized in the passage. Sin's diction emphasizes her own tragic oppression and lack of self-determination. Right? So there's a landing spot. It's not, here's this word, it's interesting, here's this word, it's interesting here. This student lands with the idea, why does this matter? Always ask that question, why am I noticing this? Okay, well, this passage shows an oppressed and a lack of determination, self-determination. And then you have the inquiry paper. So students come in, and a few times during a reading of a text like this, round table, teacher talks minimally. I write one of these as well. I share my question. We go around. Everybody just reads their question. They don't talk beyond that. And then it's free form for an hour. And the teacher should talk as little as possible. It's some of my favorite classes are when students share what they notice. And with great text, what's awesome is that it's never the same class. You can have 2 or 3 of these in a day and have wildly different conversations because if the texts are rich and the students are different, they're going to notice different things. Okay, so I'll share this with you. The student gave me permission to share it. Question, how is sin a perverted parallel of Eve? John Milton's epic poem Paradise Lost details Satan's vengeful conquest to corrupt the human race, beginning with Adam and Eve. When Satan first meets Eve, Milton presents her as a female ideal with near divine looks and acquiescent devotion to Adam. but also with her own capability for choice and free will. Satan also meets his own daughter, Sin, however, who is reduced to her childbearing abilities and holds no choice of free will over her body. Milton casts these two characters, Eve and Sin, as mirror images of each other and uses them to exemplify his thesis on the importance of free choice as well as any danger which may accompany it. So this sounds like a thesis statement. I'm just telling you, in inquiry papers, I don't ask for this. And if this was like a research paper, I would ask him to create a little more nuance here. But for our purposes, it's really, really good. All right, here's the first body paragraph. It's not much longer. When Satan first meets Sin in the poem, he acts as if he does not recognize her. Whether he's being genuine or not, again, a good thing to ask when it comes to Satan, Sin reminds Satan of his role as both her father and rapist and explains how she was doomed to guard hell. She further goes into detail about her subsequent rape by death, her own child, and the ensuing torments she endures, as she describes. And again, we've gone over this, right? Me overtook, death's mother, all dismayed, and in embraces forcible and foul, engendering with me of that rape, begot these yelling monsters. Now, the nice thing, when he started to draft this, his inference work had been done and his quote sentences have been done. Sin places a very heavy emphasis on, ironically, the sins committed against herself. Sin, by unconventionally beginning the sentence with the direct object, me, and then immediately bringing up her role as a mother, she places her own victimized self at the center of these atrocities and elicits unexpected sympathy as such an antagonized character. Sin further expands upon her nuanced role as a mother by describing death's attack as an embrace, a word which typically carries a safe, loving connotation, now used to describe a violent assault. In this way, Sin is emphasizing the betrayals she experienced from her own kin. In contrast to Eve, she was forced into sex by her father and son and is constantly tormented by her offspring. So again, notice how grounded in the text this is. It's great. And he could have noticed other things, but he noticed what he noticed. From the controlling descriptions, he's going to go on. Forcible and foul, even the alliteration there connects the two in a strong way. The passive engendering me to the jarring single syllable of rape. Sin emphasizes her own tragic oppression and lack of self-determination. Okay, next quote. When Satan first meets Eve, on the other hand, she explains her initial meeting with Adam and his gentle courtship, explaining, Adam's gentle hand seized mine, I yielded, and from that time see how beauty is excelled by manly grace and wisdom which alone is truly fair. Eve serves as an antithesis of sin. Okay. Directly, and I want to delve into language first, but this is fine. Directly in contrast to the previous ironic use of the word embrace by Sin, Eve now uses seize, an inherently aggressive word. You expect seize to be in the hellish image and embrace to be in the Edenic one, and it's the opposite, which is typical Milton. An inherently aggressive word to depict an advancement of love. In doing so, Eve reinforces the idea that even when with a fairly adamant pursuer, it was still ultimately her choice to join Adam in love. It's a humongous point. Moreover, she claims she yielded, further implying that their love was based on her own free will and personal choice. This emphasis of Eve's choice and self-determination, in contrast to the exploitation of sin, casts the characters as stark contrasts to one another, thereby emphasizing Milton's notion of free will as both a potential blessing and a curse. Okay, it's the last big paragraph. Sin and Eve were not always entirely opposite, however, and were once alike in their beauty. Sin reminds Satan of her original beauty, as well as how that prompted him to act against her, as she explains that her, quote, attractive graces won the most averse thee chiefly, who full oft thyself in me thy perfect image viewing, becamest enamored, and such joy thou tookst with me in secret that my womb conceived a growing burden. And watch what he pays attention to. There's lots here. In reference to Satan, Sin carefully maintains thy and thou as the subject of each verb, emphasizing Satan's control over her and how each action she lists was performed solely by him unto her. It's really, really good observations. Additionally, by stating that her womb began to bear a child rather than herself doing it, like the womb itself is acting, she further alienates the action and shows her lack of choice in being impregnated. Brilliant. Moreover, but wait, there's more. Sin reminds Satan that the joy he took in her was entirely one sided and implies that she did not share the same sentiment. In this way, sin's beauty actively detracted from her free will rather than adding to it. A similar emphasis is also placed on Eve's beauty, as Milton notes that Adam, in delight both of Eve's beauty and submissive charms, smiled with superior love as Jupiter on Juno smiles. Now he has some choices here. You can pay attention to the Adam and Eve business, but there's an allusion here to Jupiter and Juno that if you're a good reader, you're not going to know what Milton knows, so you might have to look some stuff up. Eve is also presented as a divinely beautiful character, but differs from sin in the responses her beauty elicits from others. Rather than the forceful lust shown to sin by Satan and death, Eve's beauty prompts offers of love and admiration from Adam, which she willingly accepts. Eve's submissive charms are a reminder of her choice to be with Adam and offer an opposite parallel to the ownership Satan claims of sin. This gentler, fairer version of love likens Adam and Eve to Jupiter and Juno, the married king and queen of Roman panthology. Jupiter is infamous for infidelity, however, and Juno is known for her jealousy and rage. So, while initially appearing as praise for the couple, Milton may also be subtly foreshadowing their faults and eventual corruption. This is really great stuff here. I just want to point this out as a very high-level little trick this guy pulled off. He's going on and on about talking about, Eve, free will, acceptance, Adam and Eve before the fall, great. And he did a little research and figured out that, Jupiter is infamous for infidelity and Juno is known for jealousy and rage. This is an example that looks like that this writer hit a roadblock in his interpretation. This doesn't go with what he wrote. And then he remembered what happens to Adam and Eve. They become jealous. They're unfaithful in their own way. And he connects that, which is brilliant. Conclusion. Ultimately, Eve's own free choice is what leads to her and Adam's downfall, as she is able to be persuaded by Satan to act against God. As Satan is highly jealous of the paradise and happiness in Eden, as well as Adam and Eve's shared love, he may be exploiting Eve's free choice to bring her down from paradise and make her equally as divinely rejected as he is. I might have ended it there, but anyway, Satan could also possibly be feeling remorse for his exploitation of sin and might be corrupting Eve as a perverted repentance for the way he treated his own daughter. I just wanted to point out that these inquiry papers shouldn't sound super definitive. Like here at the end, maybe Satan's doing this, maybe Satan's doing that. Inquiry papers are where to do that. If you have like a larger paper after you're done reading a book, you probably should be a little more confident. I think it's really good. This guy's only a third of the way through the poem. How could he know? Anyway, I'm hoping this is helpful. I hope a lot of teachers use this strategy. I find it really effective for social reasons, pedagogical reasons. And I just think it gets kids to write more and talk more in class. So I hope this has been helpful, and good luck.